continuing our Earth Week guests this morning with Karl Koenig. He is from Becker Soil and Water Conservation District. He is the Aquatic Invasive Species Coordinator for the county. And good morning, Karl.
Good morning, Carol. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yes, indeed. Very well. So, Karl, this, of course, we are entering into another season of aquatic invasive species monitoring at local lake accesses, and I'm sure that this program is continuing and is going to start up as planned, even during this COVID-19.
In Minnesota, watercraft inspectors are trained and authorized by the Minnesota DNR. The DNR has canceled their in-person training sessions. They are working on moving that training to a online format. So once that training is available and Minnesota does raise the stay-at-home regulations right now, our inspectors will be able to work. So it's a little bit up in the air right now, but I'm hoping that we don't have too much of a delay with that program.
All right, because of obviously, and maybe even unfortunately, aquatic invasive species are not affected by COVID-19. So they are still out there, and I'm sure that we may even find more in area lakes. But if people aren't able to get out and inspect or even investigate, then I guess we don't know if it's spreading.
That's right. And even if we don't have a inspection program on the ground right away at the beginning of the boating season, later on here as the growing season begins, myself and other seasonal employees will continue the aggressive monitoring work that we've been doing the last couple of years. We go to those high traffic areas that are identified as high risk for infestation by invasive plant species, and we actually get in the water and look for them, sometimes with boats, retrieving plants with rake heads, or snorkeling. And that will certainly continue and hopefully be expanded this year. Last year we brought on a scuba diver to work with us at some of the highest traffic sites in the county, places like Big Detroit and Big Cormorant Lakes. Those lakes are known by the University of Minnesota researchers as potentially high risk for infestation by starry stonewort. And we're out there kind of testing that model and that forecast, actually looking at those sites on the ground, and with hopes that if they were to be infested by an invasive plant species, we could identify that before it became widespread and move ahead with some kind of management activity to contain it.
All right, I'm on the line on the Zoom interview circuit here this morning with Karl Koenig, and he is the Aquatic Invasive Species Coordinator for Becker County because we got money allocated to us to develop a program to monitor the aquatic invasive species and also to provide for inspections at accesses, and I think we're probably midway through that money. I think when was that allocated, Karl? Back in 2013?
It first became available, I believe, in late 2014, and Becker County hired me in 2015 when I began, the program that we're running now.
Okay, and one of the aspects of your position too is to educate people about invasive species, whether plant or animal. And one of those things, of course, is people will be starting to put in their docks and being out on the lake. And what are some of the things that you can ask people to do, in particular for those lakes that are deemed infested? I'm sure you want them to follow up with you about any changes they may see in the zebra mussels, or if in fact they do see a different kind of weed growing, and maybe educate themselves about what to look for.
Absolutely. Carol, if people see something, plant or animal, something that seems unusual in a lake, they can contact myself, our office, or the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. They have individuals who are AIS specialists at the Fergus Falls and Park Rapids office, and they do like to investigate those reports. I'm glad that you mentioned lakeshore property owners and the owners of dock and lift equipment. That's an area that I'd like to look at a little bit more this year with our efforts for education. Because it was found by research that was done by the state that there's kind of a lack of knowledge surrounding what to do with dock and lift equipment. How do you transport it? What regulations cover that? And it is a bit confusing to keep all that straight. The important thing to keep in mind with dock and lift equipment is that it cannot be moved from one lake to another without being dried out for 21 days. That law is in place, of course, to kill invasive species that need to live in the water. Drying them out for 21 days can kill them. This equipment can't be decontaminated like we would decontaminate a boat. It's made with metal tubing. It's hard to access all the surfaces on there, so that law is in place just to make sure that nothing is living there. Even if you're not moving this equipment from one lake to another lake, it does need to be cleaned off when it's being transported down a public roadway. So if it's just sitting in your yard, you can move it in and out of the lake without cleaning it. That's not a problem. But if you need to move it down the road on a trailer to an access site, it does need to be cleaned off. Even if it's, dead zebra mussels from the previous year, that is what the law states. Now, lake service provider businesses are allowed to transport this equipment away from public access sites and clean it at their properties. And lake service provider businesses are trained in best practices to prevent the spread of invasive species, and hiring one of these businesses might be a convenient way to just know that you're following the rules related to movement of water-related equipment and invasive species.
All right, Karl Koenig from Becker Soil and Water Conservation District. He's the Aquatic Invasive Species Coordinator, talking about some of the things to consider as we're heading into open water season here in the lakes area. People will be, I'm sure, putting in their docks. There's just enough water out there free that dock installation can begin, I think, and people want to do that sooner than later. So some good things to know. And Karl, starry stonewort has been on the horizon as the latest and maybe one of the more devastating aquatic invasive plants. And I'm sure as the waters warm up and more study is done, more eyes are on the lake, how close is it to us this year in this area now? Yeah,
in Minnesota, starry stonewort has been found in 14 lakes. I believe the closest lake to us is on the northern edge of Hubbard County, a smaller lake called Wolf Lake, up near Bemidji. And there's kind of a cluster of lakes that are infested up there in Beltrami County near Bemidji. And in some lakes where starry stonewort gets established, it does grow really aggressively and can affect, boating and swimming activities that happen in the water. So again, that's why we are taking a look at these access sites, places where, that infestation would begin, trying to identify it and contain it. But yeah, that Wolf Lake in northern Hubbard County, I believe, is the closest lake to Detroit lakes that is infested that we know of.
Okay. All right. Karl Koenig from Becker Soil and Water Conservation District, the Aquatic Invasive Species Coordinator, today with us. And as we wrap up today, Karl, anything else you want to add?
Sure. One more thing, just as fishing season starts here, minnows are popular early season, effective for walleyes and crappies. We're going to be using minnows and leeches out in the lakes here, probably starting this weekend. There'll be some lakes open for fishing. Remember the rules that are governing the use of water and transporting water. You can save minnows and use them at different lakes, take them home with you. You just can't take the lake water home with you or to another lake. So plan ahead a little bit, maybe have a cooler of water in your vehicle. That way when you get to the lake, you can put the minnows in your bait well on lake water, and when you leave, you have some water that didn't go out into the boat with you to haul them, either home or to the next location. And then that way all lake water can be drained as you leave the access, which is required by law.